Hey, good morning everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss Pre-Market Report for June 28th, 2017. Happy hump day. I'm Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. We had quite a sell-off in the previous session here, where prices, after being rejected at the 43 halves, yet again, we've gotten to move to the outer edge of the range. And this is what I mentioned earlier in the week. This range is rather narrow. And if we get too far outside of it, we're coming right back. And if we get too far this way, we usually come right back. We're now testing the previous month's close price, which has been bid on multiple occasions here throughout the month. We have a very narrow range already with just a few sessions to go for the month. And you can see here that the projected upcoming month's pivot range is going to be very, very narrow, which suggests that we could see expansion coming soon. Now, I've mentioned before that any pullback here into this previous close could be a buying opportunity to return it back toward 34 to 36 and perhaps higher. Any failure to hold that level will then test 2400 to 2404 half, and that's kind of like the last line of defense here for bulls to defend. Otherwise, failure to hold that level starts to rotate this thing back toward 2380 and perhaps as low as 2350. So again, I've mentioned that over and over again, and it continues to remain true. Overall, pushing this price back towards support here suggests that bulls want to come back in and lift it back up. Now, the key level to watch intraday here is going to be 24.28. That's where the market is currently pushing toward at the moment. We could be looking at a short-term continuation into 28s, followed by bears looking to defend 28s from below after that support level had been violated. So right now, price is pausing at the 24.24s. You can see here that we had a very wide PivotBoss bands, third standard deviation. They've now normalized to be much more narrow. So that tells you right there we may have found our edges. Again, 24.28 here, we may see a little bit more strength into that area, and then perhaps there could be another push back toward value. So right now, the 24.10 zone, very, very key area of support. You can see here that the previous overnight low here has just been rejected and a push higher. So right now, this thing could be short-term pushed higher. I would say a rotation back into 24.20 could provide a push into 24.28, followed by a rotation back toward 24.20. All right, let's take a look here at crude oil. Crude here in the higher time frame shows we've had quite a move here that's played out to the upside, but it's been very, very tentative about pushing higher. Every time it pushes higher, it kind of pulls back, pushes higher, pulls back. But nonetheless, we're seeing higher highs and higher lows day over day for the most part. We're back above the 43.75s, which is very important. And that's an important zone right there because failure to hold outside this area would suggest a rotation back, at least back toward the mid of the range. And that'll take you to about 48.75s. So right now, this is the key range to watch. Failure to hold this level or below it could rotate this thing back toward 48.75, but we haven't seen the rejection that we'd really like to see just yet. It's been a quiet push higher, but we really haven't seen that real rejection signature that would give us the confidence that this thing is going to do that just yet. So still waiting for that signature overall. This thing has been a quiet push higher. If there's any failure to really hold above 43.75, we could be retesting lows to see what happens down there. So right now, nothing really clear and clean here in crude oil other than prices pushing back above 43.75, which would suggest more upside if it can hold above that zone. So right now, still tentatively watching this for signs of further strength, and we're still in an area here we have to be kind of careful. So taking a look at the intraday time frame, we're seeing price coil up significantly right now, kind of a wedge that's building out. Here it is right here, very, very narrow range that's tightly coiled here. That right there suggests that we could see near-term expansion one way or another. Anytime you see compression of price, it tells you nothing about direction. It just tells you that the spread of the data is very narrow, and that could lead to expansion. Very similar to what we saw in the NQ yesterday, which I'll show here in a moment. Above 44.30 could spark a continuation higher. Otherwise, failure to get above that zone likely rotates back toward 43.75 for another retest, at least on an intraday basis. That could be an opportunity to bring it back toward value at 44.08. All right, taking a look here at the NQ. The NQ had a significant move lower in the previous session. Again, we've seen these time and time again where we've had these one-day wonders where we have one big sell-off followed by an aggressive continuation higher. This was a big sell-off that occurred after the rejection of prices above 5,800, more specifically 5,850. That's the bottom of this range here. I mentioned before on this bounce that any push into 5,800, 5,815 could be a great selling opportunity for 55.50. We didn't quite see that move materialize right away. Instead, price came in and then got the move. So this has been very interesting how it's played out. One thing that is for certain right now is that prices below the key range low have been rejected, at least on the first test here. And you can see that we're leaving behind at least a developing tail right now. Obviously, this can change throughout the day as we head into RTH. But right now, the early push below these lows have been rejected short term. That could be an opportunity to bring it right back toward the 57.63. So something to watch out for here. If we take a look at the intraday time frame, something that was very interesting yesterday before we got out of the trading room, I mentioned to our traders that the SD3 bands, so the PivotBoss bands, have gotten very, very narrow and compressed. Earlier in the day, we had wider bands, but as this thing continued to push on throughout the session, heading into our 11 o'clock finish here, look how narrow the third standard deviation bands are. This is the third standard deviation above VWAP, third standard below. When they're that significantly compressed, that is a warning to expect significant expansion. So that was the last thing I mentioned to our traders before we got out of the room for lunch, was watch for significant expansion. It could come this afternoon, it could come the next day or the next morning, and right away we started to see the expansion to the downside, and that led to a significant sell-off back toward 56.70. So that compression there helped us identify that we could see expansion one way or another, and it got to the downside and continued lower. So that's something we look for time and time again using the PivotBoss bands. Right here, what we've seen is a rejection at 56.32. Price pops back up and holds support here off of 56.50. So we've had a steady drop here from 58.50 to 56.50 of 200 plus points. Now this area is becoming support as this is trying to climb back above the previous session's close. Pushing above this close right now, as it's doing, suggests that a pullback could be a great buying opportunity for a continuation back toward 57.20. So right now, seeing signs of rejection that could lead to near-term strength and a continuation of this move. Lastly, let's take a look at ZB. All right, here's a look at ZB. ZB had significant selling pressure in the previous session here, where price failed to push to a new high and instead started to take out multi-day lows. 3-day lows were taken out. You see the midpoint right here. We got a 50% stop run day and dropped right back toward the 155s. We were gunning for 155.10, 155.09, which was the previous key level. We got that level in the day and then some. And now you can see that we've had even more weakness here and recently seen a bounce underway at the moment. So nice rejection tail coming in right off the 154.07s and off the previous session's high. Very important key levels right there. This one has been very interesting because once we've broken out on this session here, it's been a steady continuation up until yesterday, where half of those gains were given back and then all of the gains were basically given back. So this has been very significant on this pullback. This rejection here in a stacked and sloped environment, hitting the trigger zone yet again, could be an opportunity for bulls to come back in and lift this back up toward highs above 157.10. So right now, watching to see how this plays out. We're seeing intraday strength right now. A pullback toward 154.30 could offer an opportunity to buy and push this thing back higher on a swing basis. So watching for that as it plays out the rest of the session. All right, that's it for now. Let's see how this plays out the rest of the day. Good luck and trade well.